Welcome, everybody. We'll give the people that might be on a different call a couple of minutes time to switch, and then we'll start at 2 minutes past the hour. Thank you. Janet, the floor is yours.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Wherever this finds you today, I hope it finds you well. My name is Janet Hoder, and as Senior Communications Specialist for the CGIAR Research Program on Agriculture for Nutrition and Health, it is my pleasure to welcome you to today's Nutrition for Growth side event, Ensuring Nutritious Diets for Everyone, Everywhere. We're grateful to you for joining us, whether you're here with us live or watching the recording at a later time. Today, we're going to take an in-depth look at nutrition challenges facing people in a variety of contexts and what priority actions can be taken to most effectively address these challenges. It's a complex topic, to be sure, and we have some incredibly thoughtful voices representing a wide variety of stakeholder perspectives to explore this with us today. Before we get started, I have a few reminders to go over. For those of you joining us via Zoom today, please ensure that your cameras are off and your microphones are muted for the duration of the program. Our panelists in each of the discussions will unmute themselves and turn their cameras on when their panel comes up. But for our other attendees, we ask that you keep those cameras off and microphones muted. We invite you to ask questions of our speakers and panelists using the chat function. We won't be able to go into those during the discussions, but our speakers will be engaged in the chat throughout the program and can respond to you there. We have a very full program for you, so without delay, I'd like to introduce Mr. Toyohisa Aoyama, Director General of the Agriculture, Forestry, and Fisheries Research Council Secretariat in the Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry, and Fisheries of Japan. Mr. Aoyama wasn't able to be with us live today, but sent these remarks.
I'm Toyohisa Aoyama, Director General of Research Council Secretariat, Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries, MAF Japan. At the beginning of the CGIAR Symposium, held as an official side event of the Tokyo Nutrition for Growth Summit, I would like to extend my greetings on behalf of MAF. In recent years, global issues such as climate change, extreme weather, poverty, hunger, and transboundary pests and disease have become more serious in the global food system. Under these circumstances, the United Nations Food System Summit was held in September this year, and the Tokyo Nutrition for Growth Summit is being held right now. The world is continuing to search for a sustainable food system. Nutrition is an essential part of a healthy and sustainable food system. The double burden of malnutrition, comprising both undernutrition and overnutrition, has become an important issue all over the world. We need to make more efforts to resolve the issue globally. There is no one-size-fits-all solution for improving nutrition, and it is important to take into account the particularities of each country and region, including climate and food culture. Based on this recognition, Japan has provided international support for improving nutrition around the world in cooperation with international organizations. In the side event of the Tokyo Nutrition for Growth Summit, organized by MAF, we will present an action plan regarding improvement of nutrition after discussing the contribution of Japan's agriculture and food-related industries with domestic and international stakeholders. The role of R&D and innovation is also extremely important in nutrition improvement efforts. It is required to make people's behavior by conducting R&D to improve nutrition, providing its information, disseminating new knowledge, and carrying out nutrition education. MAF is also making international contribution in the field of R&D by funding nutritional guidance and biofortification projects at Biofortified International, International Institute of Tropical Agriculture, and Africa Rice Center. In view of such importance of R&D and innovation, today's CGIAR symposium is really timely. We think that the aim of this event is not only to share the current status of nutrition problems in developing countries, including specific case examples and their lessons, but also to promote collaboration between practitioners on the front lines of nutrition issues and researchers in the field of agriculture and food. We hope that this symposium will serve as an opportunity to deepen mutual understanding among a diverse range of stakeholders, including practitioners, farmers, researchers, governments, and aid agencies, regarding the global change of improving nutrition.
We're grateful to Mr. Aoyama for sharing his thoughts with us. As he notes, no one-size-fits-all approach will help us solve our global nutrition challenges, and it will take research, development, and collaborations across sectors to truly identify solutions. These are themes we will no doubt hear throughout our dialogue today. We'd now like to hear from you, our audience. Please go to menti.com and enter the password you will see on the screen in just a moment. We invite you to weigh in on what you see as the most critical priority actions to ensure nutritious diets for everyone, everywhere. So again, if you take a moment and pull up menti.com, perhaps on your smartphone, if you are using a laptop so that you've got a separate screen, that code is at the top there. And please weigh in and we'll take a look and see what those gathered with us today identify as the most crucial priority actions to ensure nutritious diets. And in a moment, we'll start to see some of those results.
And let's make sure that we invite both panelists and attendees to participate in our Menti poll.
Indeed, everyone who is with us today is welcome to participate. I am entering the code right now myself.
You shouldn't say that because then we know what you vote.
But I haven't done it yet. That was not me. we see we are starting to have some votes come in, so please, we'll take a look at these as we go along and watch these results coming in. And certainly there are so many possible points of emphasis for priority actions. But we're just thinking today, about where you would start. And we see building partnerships and cross-sectoral collaborations right now is receiving the top priority. With understanding and assessing trade-offs also important to consider. Identifying new interventions, I see that climbing in the rankings there. Also some emphasis behind engagement of non-traditional partners, as well as more effective learning from one another's experiences, which is hopefully something we'll be able to do today. But it does sort of seem like building partnerships and cross-sectoral collaborations is holding as the most crucial, identified by those who are with us today. Certainly all of these being important and definitely hard to settle on just one. So we're not suggesting that one should be the only one to go forward, but certainly where do we start in addressing the challenges? So, and as some of those votes still continue to come in, this is something that we'll also be revisiting later on in our session. We'll ask you to consider these points and these options because we'll revisit this question and see later in our session how our thoughts on this may or may not have changed based on the exciting discussions we have coming up. So, and as responses continue to come in, I'd like to actually invite Juan Lucas Restrepo, Global Director for Partnerships and Advocacy with CGIAR and Director General of the Alliance of Biodiversity International and CIAT, to offer opening remarks. Juan Lucas, can I turn over to you?
Yes, Janet, thanks a lot. I'm very pleased to be here today in this important event, and this session is very timely. As we all know, nutrition has been high on the agenda of many international fora in the past few months. Now, more than ever, the global community is recognizing that it's not enough to produce large quantities of food to achieve zero hunger. This food also needs to be accessible, affordable, nutritious, and safe. Nutrition has been an area of key concern all along the preparation of the UNFSS summit, with a number of multi-stakeholder coalitions being formed around this topic. Nutrition emerged clearly as one of the 5 action areas identified by the Secretary General as an outcome of the summit, recognizing its cross-cutting nature and relevancy for other areas. Globally, we have built food systems that are complex and interdependent, but failing to deliver nutritious, sustainable diets for about 3 billion people. Nutrition is central to progress in many areas today, from health and unemployment to environmental degradation and climate change. Many of the discussions at COP26 this year focused on the linkages between climate and diets as part of a growing recognition of the role of food systems as a solution space in the fight against climate change. Also, with the COP15 of the UNCBD approaching, many coalitions of parties and observers are pushing for the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework to explicitly recognize the role of biodiversity in achieving sustainable food systems, including nutritious and healthy diets. As a result, truly transforming our food systems to ensure healthy diets and nutrition for everyone, everywhere, will require science and policy solutions adapted to particular contexts. And we will see a lot of this today. Drawing the threads together from the UNFSS and COP, the Nutrition for Growth Summit is a moment to zero on clear commitments to nutrition-sensitive investment. Today's session will try to explore the interconnectedness of nutrition, human and planetary health challenges, reflect on how research and innovation can help address these challenges, and identify lessons from proven and scalable solutions. We will do so by giving the word to our partners and to the audience on 3 key topics related to nutrition: sustainable and accessible diets, safe and affordable healthy diets, and resilient and inclusive food systems. With this new format, we would like to give space to our partners and start from their thoughts to see how CGIAR in this very significant moment of change can complement and enhance what others are doing to address the nutrition challenge. This reflects our current thinking on how CGIAR would like to work moving forward with partners and for partners. Thank you, and back to you, Janet.
Thank you, Juan Lucas. As you know, nutrition and food systems come up again and again in international conversations, underscoring their cross-cutting importance. We're very much looking forward to hearing from our partners today on how we can move forward together in addressing the challenges we face globally. So let's turn now to our first discussion for today. This group of experts will explore the issues surrounding sustainable and accessible diets and meeting the nutrition challenges of rural households. It will be moderated by Jan Lowe, principal scientist and leader of the Sweet Potato for Profit and Health Initiative at the International Potato Center. Jan, thanks so much for being here today. We look forward to hearing from you and your panelists.
Well, it's great to be here today. And I think when we talk about healthy and affordable diets in rural areas, exploiting the synergies between nutrition and agriculture must be a key focus. In the context of food systems, having to ensure more sustainable food production, start producing more nutrient-rich foods, and yet ensure that farmers still make a profit can seem a daunting challenge. Moreover, we know that in many countries, a large percentage of rural households have now become net purchasers of food, and they are subject to the same marketing influences that some urban consumers face. So today, we have an exciting panel of practitioners and scientists who are using innovative products, integrated approaches, or digital tools to address the challenge of ensuring nutritious diets, and they have used their advocacy skills to start to move these interventions to scale. I want to start off our learning process by talking with an Ugandan veterinarian turned farmer, Emma Nalulima, who is proud to be referred to in her community as Mama Pig. Emma, your farm, 1 Acre Limited, has become famous, not only in Uganda, but beyond, as an example of how farmers can make a small piece of land profitable. It is an integrated livestock crop operation that uses many innovative technologies. Can you tell us how the whole process works? And what was your approach to make it profitable and keep it profitable over time?
Thank you, Jen. It all started by wanting to put food on my table. So I gave birth to premature twins and I needed to feed them. But originally I'm a vet and I was already keeping pigs for commercial purposes. Then along the way, after giving birth, I needed to put food on my table. I had this heap of dung just there. And then, of course, with our staple food as matoke, I was using the dung for fertilizer. Then I had some little chickens, and each time I opened them, I always saw them going next to the dung, and I wondered, what are they doing? And then, of course, I went and looked at what they're doing. All I saw, they were either picking earthworms, maggots, and everything. And remember, the cost of living was high, even to produce food for the pigs, at the same time, food for the chickens. So that's why I was actually doing free range for the chickens, so that I don't spend so much on food. And then when I noticed, I went back, of course, I'm a scientist, I've gone to school. I then went back to my helminthology. Then I read a lot about it. I read on internet and found out that actually I can feed the chickens and fish on maggots and earthworms. So I went ahead and did that in a better way, so that I just feed my chickens. And actually I increased my number of chickens. Earlier there were maybe 10, and then I increased them to 30, 50, yeah. And then even I started keeping the broilers as well. And then I'm also keeping fish. I'm keeping fish, and then the water that comes from the fish helps me actually irrigate my vegetables and my matoke. So that's how I really went on, and then so I ended up having like different quarters on my land. I have a quarter of matoke, a quarter of fish, on another quarter I have fish, and then I also produced cattle. I introduced cattle. So when I introduced cattle, I was now using the milk, of course, to feed my family, and now we have a school as well, so we feed the children, of course, on milk, and the rest, the surplus, we sell in the community. So that's how I ended up actually making sure that, so when the water from the when I get the dung from the cattle, I use this dung to cook. I use it for biogas. So in the process, actually, I'm not cutting down trees. I'm not buying gas for, so I'm actually saving on my cost of production. So how am I doing is I do it because this is how I began. And then what I'm doing is that I'm training as many people who want to come to my farm. And I just tell them the three things. I'm like, first of all, is food security. Because if you don't have food, you can't even think. So food security is important so that they can have food, nutritious food at that, for their families, and then they can sell. And because I do a lot of organic, I don't do so much, I don't use a lot of chemicals. When I sell my produce, I sell it at a premium because everyone would like to have something that is natural. So that's how I end up making profit on the farm. Thank you.
Thank you. And can you briefly tell us what kinds of additional support do you think would make it easier to take your approach to scale in Uganda? Can farmers really adopt parts of your model at scale?
Oh, yeah, farmers can really adopt our model. And actually, not only farmers in Uganda, but farmers all over the world, all over East Africa, Africa, and all over the world. Recently, actually, on last week on Friday, I just sent off three people from Zambia. They had been on the farm for the last 10 days. They were at the farm, and they came all the way from Zambia just to study and see what we are doing. So that helps because my farm is open. My farm is open and people come. So how do we need to be helped? We need to be helped, or to put at scale, is that the challenge we have in Uganda, or maybe in Africa, but let me talk for Uganda, is extension services. Farmers are literally orphans when it comes to extension. I'm lucky that I'm a vet, so 3/4 of the extension I would have needed, I know, so I do my personal extension service. But then farmers out there don't have, they really want to farm, they have the zeal, they could even be having the money to pay for the extension services, but the extension people are not there. So if one way is to help on making sure that extension services are taken to the farmer. And how did I actually continue doing this? I'm like, okay, fine. Because everyone kept wanting to come. They call you, please come to my farm. They come to your farm, they see, but then they also want you to go and handhold them and check on them. And then it meant I would clone myself, and then I would not work on my farm. And I said the only option I had, or the better way for me to help everyone, was to set a school. So we put up a school, MSc Junior School. It's a primary school, it's normal school. It's a very normal school, but with a bias to agriculture. Why? Because the backbone of our nation is agriculture. The backbone of our nation is agriculture, number one. And then if everyone at the end of the day would want to, because everyone kept coming, and we're like, okay, if we give these little children knowledge, we don't expect them to be farmers, but they have this little knowledge. And when they go back home, they can help their parents, they can give their parents this knowledge, or even for someone who doesn't attend our school, but there's a neighbor, they can still give this little information. And that's how we try to clone ourselves as. So there are many extension workers I'm giving, but not only in their homes. And of course, we want them to teach their parents. They want, maybe their siblings who don't come to school. But at the end of the day, farmers need extension services. So if we can do research, and another thing also, what we can do.
Emma, sorry to interrupt, but thank you very, very much for your contribution. That's really exciting, your training program. So now we are going to turn to Dr. Devendra Kumar Yadava. He's the Assistant Director General of the Indian Council of Agriculture Research and a plant breeder with a keen interest in getting quality seed to farmers. Dr. Yadava, welcome.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon. Yes, India is at the forefront of developing and releasing biofortified staples, such as zinc wheat, zinc rice, high iron pearl millet, iron lentils, and orange flesh vitamin A rich sweet potato. India has several public support programs to assure that food grains reach the most vulnerable sections of the society, and other programs to ensure that children are well nourished. Can you briefly describe for us how biofortified staples might be or are being integrated into these programs?
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. And thanks to the organizers for this opportunity. In fact, in India, we have a very strong crop improvement program. Until now, we have bred more than 5,600 varieties of different crops. But earlier, our more emphasis was towards higher yield. But during last few years, we realized the importance of nutrition, and we started our program through one or two of the programs, and even the collaborations with the international organizations and programs like Harvest Plus and other CG institutions. So in that, we could develop till now almost 85 different biofortified varieties, which includes maximum number of wheat, then rice, and maize, pearl millet. So all these varieties we have developed. So first of the most important thing is that they making the availability of the quality seed of these all biofortified varieties. So in this direction, we did a very commendable job, and we put all those varieties in the seed chain. The system which we are following in our country started from the breeder seed to foundation seed and certified seed. So till now, during last 3 years, we see we have produced more than 11,200 that quintals, hundreds of this breeder seed and distributed to the various agencies. And that seed is being produced, and presently we have almost 4.5 million hectare area under the various biofortified varieties, which has maximum coverage of wheat, particularly for the zinc, iron, and protein-rich varieties. So regarding the distribution to the public, we have a very strong public distribution system from the government of India, through which the ration is going to a huge population. And now under the COVID situation, already our government is giving free ration to more than 80 crore of 8 million population since the initiation of COVID. So under that public distribution system, we have put almost all these biofortified varieties of rice, wheat, maize, pearl millet, and pulseed, so that these materials, they can reach to the public. And we are well aware that this is the easiest way to reach to the masses, the biofortified material. The other issue is we have the various schemes in the education department. There one midday meal scheme is there in all the educational institutes at the primary level. And in that scheme, the food material is being supplied to the children, to the students in the school. And in that scheme also, we have tried to put these materials. Another issue is we have the various programs through our extension system, through the government of India and the various state governments program, where the Nutri Thali, that is we have a plate with all the nutritious diversified diet in that plate, the Nutri-sensitive village, Nutri-smart village. So that type of scheme through our agriculture farm science centers, we have started in almost all the districts, all the zones of our country. And through that also the sensitization as well as the demonstration of these programs, they are being done so that these materials, the public can be well aware about that, as well as these can reach to the masses in the shortest time. So these are our main activities which we are trying to take these biofortified material to our masses at the shortest time. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much for that overview of how getting them into these various programs that you have in India and strong extension support are taking these biofortified crops to scale. I would now like to welcome the head of finance and operations of Food for Education in Kenya, Wairimu Nyandia, to talk about this exciting school feeding initiative, which was founded in 2018 by another young Kenyan woman, Wawiru Njiru, who was just named the UN Person of the Year for 2021. Wairimu, can you briefly explain how your program is using digital tools to provide nutritious meals to primary school children, support local farmers, and monitor impact in Kenya?
Thank you so much, Jen. the Food for Education, our mission is to ensure that no kid goes to school and learns while hungry. So like you mentioned, Food for Education started in 2018 with only 25 kids who we were feeding. I think it started as a hobby, but currently, as we're speaking today, we were able to supply meals to 33,000 kids across 3 kitchens. And this is in Ruiru, which is in Kiambu County, Dagoretti, which is Nairobi County, and Mombasa around the Nyali area. So how the program works, we prepare the food centrally across the 3 kitchens. And in Ruiru, currently, we're able to supply the food across 18 public schools, and in Dagoretti across 7 public schools. And then in Mombasa, we're currently supplying food in 3 schools. So how we have 3 different menus, which entails rice and beans, rice and lentils, githeri, and for those who might not know what githeri has, is basically beans and maize and vegetables. So the quantities, what differentiates us with any other meal providing organization in the country is our meals contain 600 grams of food, and this is 70% of the daily recommended intake for every child. And the composition of the carbohydrates and the protein is carbohydrate 60%, 58 to 60%, and the plant protein between 40 to 42%. So the sourcing element, we make sure that we centrally source everything from smallholder aggregators who work with farmers. So our parents become our suppliers, and this is also to ensure that the community itself is our biggest supporter and our ambassador, so which they end up making an income from it. And then the payment platform, we went in 2019, we were able to create a payment platform that we call Tap to Eat. I think I can be able to show this. So every child has this wristband that we offer for free that is NFC enabled. So what happens, the parent registers on USSD, and then the child comes to the school and they get the wristband for free. And every time they get a meal, 15 shillings, Kenya shillings, and that's 15 cents dollars is deducted. So it's also a saving platform for parents where they're able to top up 50 shillings today, 25 shillings tomorrow, and they're able to know that their kid will be able to access a nutritious and affordable meal on a daily basis.
Just to follow up on that, many school feeding programs struggle with sustainability. What is your strategy for making this program larger yet sustainable over time?
Good question, because currently as we are, the parent contribution is only able to cater for 57% of the direct cost. Our goal is in the next, by 2026, we'll be able to reach 1 million kids per day. And currently we're doing 33. So we're trying to leverage on efficient supply chain where we're able to buy in bulk. And that way we're able to reduce or negotiate for better pricing. And from our prediction and the budgets that we've done, by that year, we are seeing the parents will be able to contribute 75% of their direct cost. And right now, the biggest partnership that we're aiming to get into is with the government, where we can be able to tell them the difference between the 175, which is 25%, they can come on board, which means we won't be donor reliant by 2026.
Thanks very much for that interesting description, Wairimu. And now I would like to introduce Aisha Twalibu, who has been part of an IFPRI-led research team that conducted a randomized controlled trial of a community-based early childhood development center platform in Malawi, promoting the consumption of diversified diets and food production. Aisha, welcome.
Thank you.
Can you turn your video on, please?
I think Marco has control, so may you please do that.
Okay, very good. Did you find that the intervention had the desired impact? And if so, what worked best?
All right. And yes, so I'll start with briefly introducing the intervention. So this was an integrated agriculture, nutrition, and early childhood development intervention that we delivered through a preschool platform that is known as a community-based childcare centers. This is mainly because it is community-led only by volunteers. So what we intended to do with the intervention was to improve household production of diverse as well as nutritious foods and caregiver knowledge on child nutrition and feeding practices, as you can see from the slide. And this particular intervention had two main aspects. So delivering of information, which was through the trainings, and these trainings were there to improve production as well as feeding practices, and then agricultural inputs. So for the agricultural inputs, we mainly had orange maize and orange flesh sweet potatoes because of the vitamin A, and then soybeans because of the protein, kidney beans because of the iron, and amaranth because of the iron as well as other agricultural inputs. So like I said, this was community-led by actors, which included parenting groups. So parenting groups basically consist of the parents of these preschoolers, which are aged 3 to 5 years old, and then the preschool management committees, as well as teachers, and these are all volunteers. So yes, we did see that this actually had an impact in the following ways. You know, those improved agricultural production diversity of all these crops that we had given to the community, those improved caregiver knowledge about nutrition, those improved frequency and quality of the preschool meals, but also those improved household dietary diversity. And when you look at this, you can actually see that what we had set out to do, we actually got to see it, and the evidence is there to show us that. And how would we know this? I think for us, it's because of the strong evidence that we're able to get from this impact evaluation, but as well as an economic evaluation that we implemented later on. Thank you, Jan.
Thank you. Now, there are many examples, I've been involved in them myself, of integrated nutrition sensitive pilot projects that have good results, but have not been taken to scale. What is the case with this platform in Malawi?
It's funny that you should ask that. So this intervention has actually been scaled up by the government of Malawi through the Ministry of Gender, Social Welfare and Child Development, which is the one that is responsible for early childhood development in Malawi, in collaboration with the Department of HIV and AIDS and Nutrition, which sits under the Ministry of Health, and then the Ministry of Agriculture and Irrigation. They started scaling this up in 2019 with funding from the World Bank. And one of the reasons, and some of the factors that actually led to that scale up was that, again, that strong evidence that I mentioned earlier, not just on the impact, but the economical rationale. So I think for us, it was that, you know, with this intervention, we were able to show that the costs that were involved in delivering these nutrition actions through this CBCC platform were actually lower than expected and affordable compared to agricultural subsidies that the government of Malawi provides to rural and poor communities. And we're able to see that for every dollar that you invest, you actually are able to return a yield of about $2.4. The second enabling factor, I think, for this scale up was actually leveraging existing platforms. So for our intervention, we used the CBCC, which is an already existing platform. But secondly, we also used extension workers from the Ministry of Agriculture that were responsible for conducting the trainings that I mentioned earlier. And then this aspect of other community-led actors that are already existing. And then the other thing to note is that the community in itself was actually a strong driving force. It wasn't just about the engagement, but as well as the involvement, which led to the success of the intervention and thereby seeing the impact that we saw. So again, you're looking at a lowered cost, mainly because delivering this intervention involved voluntary labor from those CBCCs and parenting groups, but also from the government itself. So when you're thinking of scaling up, I think sustainability is always key, in that if you're relying on community participation, you need to consider all the possible community mechanisms that would act as incentives that you can embed into your programs. And I think the last one would be government, strong leadership and multi-sectoral collaboration at all stages. We had strong support from the government stakeholders, from all those ministries that I mentioned earlier, mainly because they were involved from the onset. So from the design of the research, which was actually locally contextualized, but also with the delivery itself. I mentioned the issue of the use of the extension workers for the training. So that was one of them.
Unfortunately, we have to draw this to a close. I think you've really hit on a lot of really important points. I'd like to thank all members of the panel. You can see how each country has a different enabling environment to work in, and how these innovative people have made it work and adapted to their conditions. Thanks so much, Janet. Back to you.
Thank you, Jan, and thank you to your entire panel. And that was a really interesting discussion. And I'm seeing some comments come up in the chat, so I'm hoping that we can continue the discussion there as we continue through the program today. I'd next like to turn our conversation to the subject of safe and affordable healthy diets and the nutrition challenges, particularly facing urban consumers. Our second panel discussion will be moderated by Mark Lundy, Director of Food Environment and Consumer Behavior at the Alliance of Bioversity International in INSEAD. Mark, we look forward to hearing from you and your panel about this complex and evolving topic.
Thanks, Janet. A pleasure to be here with all of you today on this exciting event. So I'm chairing a panel on, as Janet mentioned, on sustainable and affordable healthy diets, particularly with the urban consumer. And as we heard in the previous panel, clearly production and on-farm changes and changes in rural diets and rural nutrition are important. But I'm pleased to introduce this session, which is going to focus a little bit on the connection between food supply and consumers in what is known as the food environment. The food environment effectively represents the point of contact or connection between the availability of food, its affordability, and consumer preferences. Food environments are diverse and have many different contextual components across the global south, but it's important to note that in many cases they remain principally traditional or informal. So in this session, we will explore how we can ensure that consumer interaction with food and the food environment promotes and provides options for healthy, sustainable diets and promotes dietary diversity. So I'm very happy today to be joined by three distinguished colleagues to discuss this topic. First up, we have Dr. Inge Brouwer, who's an associate professor of global nutrition at Wageningen University and also leads the Food Systems for Healthy Diets flagship in the Agriculture for Nutrition and Health Collaborative Research Program. We also have Dr. Truong Thiet Mai, who's the deputy director of the National Institute of Nutrition in Vietnam and a longstanding partner on projects related to agriculture for nutrition and health, both at the technical and policy level. And finally, we're joined by Mr. Paulus Verschuren, board member of the Access to Nutrition Foundation in the Netherlands. Mr. Verschuren has a long trajectory in the private food industry, has been the special envoy for food and nutrition security for the Dutch government, and is an active member in multiple civil society organizations working on this topic. So let me start with Dr. Brouwer, with Inge. Inge, could you just give us a quick overview about how urban consumers interact with food environments and what are some of the major challenges you see them facing currently and into the future?
Thank you, Mark, and thank you for this question. Just to elaborate a bit on your introduction when thinking about food environments for the urban poor, yes, these are the places where they are actually buying or getting their food. And these places are indeed surrounding the places where they live, but you also have to think about when they go along the way to their workplace, when they go to school and in the surroundings of the workplace and the school. So they are meeting actually several food environments in a day. And as you said, indeed, The characteristics of this food environment for urban poor are mainly so-called informal. So we have to think about informal markets or wet markets, small kiosks, street food vendors, and also mobile vendors who are struggling for their daily life, hoping to sell food to consumers and to have a kind of decent income. And although maybe different than what you would think, is that supermarkets do not yet play such a large role in food provisioning. And I have to stress not yet for the poor, but maybe that will increase later. So you asked me about the challenges that consumers face when they meet in their food environment or when they go to their food environment. So let me just mention a few ones. So a very important one is, of course, the affordability. So food prices, and especially the prices of the, let's say, protective foods or the nutrition-rich foods are quite high. And if you have a poor income, it's very difficult to buy them on a day-to-day basis. But cost is certainly not the only challenge that they face. Food safety concerns also play a large role in the decisions of consumers on what to buy. And sometimes having trust in their retailer is more important than having a little bit cheaper food. Another challenge is accessibility. So when people are working long hours, for example, in factories, or when there is no food provisioning, for example, around the workplace, or when consumers live in a place called like a food desert with hardly any fresh food available, so reflecting the density of food outlets. Convenience is also another factor. I think both important for the poor as those that have a bit more income, because consumers are reluctant to buy foods that need a lot of preparation or processing, especially when they have little time to prepare food, or when they have no space to do so, if they have no fridge to store or to preserve. In addition to that, some food environments also deny access to food to some population groups, for example, by women who in some populations are limited to go outside to get food. Another challenge, and please stop me when I talk too much, Mark, because there are many challenges.
I think if we can wrap it up there, that would be great, Inga. We'll come back to you for a second question.
Yeah, so the urban populations, they face affordability, accessibility, convenience, safety, security, gender, as well as marketing as equity challenges in interacting with their food environments.
Okay, thanks, Inga. I think that gives us a very good overview of sort of some of the issues and challenges that are faced by urban consumers in their food environments, which you rightly point out are not just around their homes, but also around their places of work and education. So let me turn then to Dr. Mai. Dr. Mai, if we could discuss the specific case of Vietnam. So Inga has laid out some of the issues in the food environment. How do urban consumers in Vietnam access safe and healthy food? Do you see any of these issues that Inga has raised as being particularly important?
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Yeah, I think in Vietnam example, so I think is for the consumer to access the food safety and to how to improving the healthy and nutritious foods for the consumer in the urban. So I think in the Vietnam, I think is based on the Dr. Inga to mention. So I think in the Vietnam is the same situation. So for the consumer in the almost do you know in the Vietnam to have to receive a lot of the information from the education and the communication from the government. So the government to have issues many the document how to keep for the food safety. So of course I think in the consumer can to accept the food safety, the food and with the safety and the food with the healthy foods. So but I think in the urban area, so the consumer to can to accept. So but but some channel for the consumer in the urban. For example, in the almost the suburban area in the Hanoi now. For example, so do you know we have to doing the to produce the growing the plant and the to livestock something. So, but do you know is the not good and the not safety in the something to use a lot of the chemical and the pesticide. So, but I think is the to bring the food and the bring the vegetable food and the go to the urban to selling. So, but do we know in the of course I think the consumers urban to get and to buying and to consumer to it. Is the I think in the some problem in the urban area in the Vietnam now. So, but I think in the government to control, so but improving the situation. So I think in the many things doing in the Vietnam now. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Maya. I think that's a very interesting snapshot of what's happening in a very dynamic and rapidly changing food system such as Vietnam, and noting some of the trade-offs as well about peri-urban production closer to consumers, but then having the you know, maybe excess use of pesticides and inputs. Okay, let me transition quickly then to our third panelist, Mr. Verschuren, sorry, who's going to speak a little bit about his experience with the other, you know, elephant in the room, if you will, which is the role of the private sector, I guess. And when we talk about the private sector in the food environment, Paulus, we often see this as sort of the, you know, this is the boogeyman. This is the person these are the organizations that are coming in and causing a lot of the problems we see. So I was wondering if you could speak particularly, given your trajectory, on what are the constructive ways that we can engage with private sector actors, and ranging from both the small local actors all the way through to large multinational food companies. So if you could just speak a little bit to that, and if you have any specific examples you'd like to share, that would be particularly useful. Thank you.
It's always good to introduce yourself, of course. Thank you, Mark, for that. So let me say first that we're all being, let's say, affected by this COVID crisis here, but in many countries, COVID will result in more hunger and more malnutrition, which is, of course, an issue here. And the question is, what can we do? Or who is doing what? And particularly here, how does the private sector, as you said, fit into this here? The food and beverage companies have naturally, of course, an important role to play in promoting better diets for all. And they hold the key to solutions. And I'm the chair of Access to Nutrition Foundation. And I noticed that companies have been taking important steps towards better nutrition, integrating nutrition in their policies and practices, and also developing nutrient profiling systems to measure the healthiness of their products, and developing healthier options, of course, multinationals, and increasingly also small and medium enterprises. Food companies will need to work much closer together with science institutes, governments, to understand and respond to the consumers who are asking for better nutrition. But change starts with the belief it can be done. Change starts with the belief by leadership that it can be done, that developing and marketing healthier options offer both social but also economic return. For example, Harvest Plus and its CGIAR crop research partners offer an excellent solution by developing and promoting a wide range of nutrient-enriched staple crops. DK Yadava already mentioned some of these, like the sweet potato, the zinc rice, or high iron beans are good examples of biofortification that, when brought into the food system, can improve nutritional health when they're eating, let's say, regularly. Food companies can incorporate these ingredients easily into their product portfolio, and it is a simple and effective way to bring nutrition-sensitive agriculture on everyone's plates. So, Mark, the question is that if companies would like to do more, they can do that. It is possible, and I think it is needed.
Okay, thank you very much, Paulus. I think that provides us a good, positive approach on how to engage with the private sector. If I could just ask a quick follow-up. what about local and smaller companies, SMEs, in some of these global markets? What's the role? What can be done with SMEs and with smaller companies in these markets?
Well, if you look to, let's say, Access to Nutrition Foundation, they have developed a set of tools also for the smaller companies now, which is going to be practiced, that companies themselves can measure the quality of their foods they are producing, and also give them, let's say, tools in where and how to improve that. So you will see more and more, and it is also led by maybe multinational companies, to show them what it would take to improve products and bring more healthy options to the market. And of course, increasingly small and medium enterprises, they are, I think, key producers in many of these countries here. So they will take a bigger burden, I would say, in changing that portfolio. And we see the first results coming into that. So that's a positive sign.
Okay, thank you, Paulus. I think that's great to make sure that we have that full coverage all the way from large companies down to the small and medium enterprises, which are especially important in the global south. Let me move back to Inga here for a second question. So Inga, we've heard sort of you provided an overview of some of the challenges in the food environment. We've heard some of the examples from Dr. Mai of what's happening in Vietnam. Paulus has provided some inputs around the role of private actors. Beyond this, what are some key innovations that you see that either are emerging or require more research to take place to really help overcome some of the challenges that you laid out in your first comments? Are there specific things you think we should be focusing on to help overcome some of these challenges across the global south? If you could just elaborate a bit on that, that would be helpful. Thanks, Inga.
Yes, thanks, Mark. I think it's right what you said, is there are quite some, let's say, fancy examples available of food environment innovations. But most of them are from high income countries. There's very little research yet done on low and middle income countries. And when there is evidence, it's not yet very strong, so it's still quite limited. And most studies have been done in the formal sector and not so much in the informal market, which for urban populations is extremely important. But there are some nice examples that I could mention that deserve a little bit more attention and more attention and more funding also to provide the evidence whether they really have an impact on the healthiness of the diets of the consumers. And I would like to elaborate a bit on the importance of the co-creation. So sitting together with the small medium enterprises to find out what would be a best way to improve their offer in terms of healthy diets. And then taking into account the consumer challenges that I just mentioned. So an example is the project that we did, Veggies for Wheels, where we as scientists sit together with retailers and consumers to address a convenience issue of consumers. And the idea was dropped to have cut and packaged vegetables brought to the workplaces and the homes of the people by just a bicycle. And this idea really went very well in Nigeria. Another project that we did is working with street food vendors to see whether they could improve the vegetables in their dishes that they sold by increasing the portion size of the vegetables or by stimulating consumers to buy a salad or a side salad. And this also provoked quite some interest of the different retailers. So this co-creation is, I think, important, and we also did this work also together with the Alliance in Nigeria and in Vietnam. Another challenge or another intervention is the ordering and delivery of food using apps, which of course got much more importance because of COVID. It increased attention to it, but the danger is that much focus will be more on the processed or even ultra processed packaged foods, which could have a health effect if it's eaten in excess. So other examples more from the top is food labeling, changes in food options, so making the healthy diet the default option, or taxes and subsidies. But for Africa and Asia, we do not have examples that it really works. So most of the examples are coming from Latin America. So yes, there are examples, but they need much more attention. especially it's a challenge to scale up to a larger population.
Okay, thanks, Inga. So this is really interesting. You've mentioned both sort of top-down, policy solutions, and also sort of these co-innovation or co-development processes with the actors themselves in the food environment. I think one of the key points there is we need to start seeing. I mean, I think the issue that you and I have discussed, but I think it's important is we need to start seeing the actors in the food environments as part of the solution rather than the problem. No,
exactly.
And so the co-development work you're mentioning is critically important there to give voice and action to these actors to help influence change. Okay, thank you, Inga. Dr. Mai, I was wondering, coming back to your issue around the food safety and healthy diets, do you see any major trade-offs in Vietnam as you make this transition in the food system from sort of a very rapid transition from a more traditional towards a more modern food system? Do you see any major trade-offs or challenges in making that transition between, for example, access to healthy, affordable diets and food safety? Do you see any issues that are of particular concern regarding affordability maybe in Vietnam? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. Thank you, Mark. Yeah, I think it's a very important question. So do you know is Vietnam now, do you know is you go to is a transition for the period for the economics and the transition for the many things in the Vietnam. So of course, do you know is to talk about the food safety, that means do you know in the urban area, so now you keep in the almost the habit to go to buying the food in the wet market, how to go to the supermarket in can to keep the food safety more and to ensure the many things to do for the food safety in the supermarkets, but more than in the wet market. So the first question, do you know in the urban area is the almost I think is the 70% in the urban area now. So to going to buy food in the wet market. So I think for the trade of training is but in the habit and to increasing the habit for the shopping and of course I think it's depend on the pocket money. Do you know? Yeah, I think it's for the how to the increasing the income. So of course, do you know is for young people now is almost to keep the money go to the shopping in the market, so not go to the wet market. So I think is almost people to keep the market. I think it's very important for the trade off for the to how to be another. I think the second for the trade off now. So do you know is the eating habits as Vietnam, do you know is of course Vietnam is a very diversity the food. So but do you know how to choose in the healthy food in the Vietnam is very important for the young people. So of course young people now to receive a lot of the Western foods habit in the go to very quickly, for example McDonald's and the KFC very quickly to go in the Vietnam now. So I think is very important. Of course I think we have too many training for the trade up in the, so I think is the thing. Yeah, okay, how to say is something. Yeah, okay.
No, I think that's great. That's great, Dr. Mai. You've provided a great overview of both the economic side of it, the importance of the wet market, and also changing dietary preferences. I think these are all major issues that we need to work on. So just to wrap up, we have a couple minutes left. Very briefly, back to Paulus. Paulus, we talked a little bit about your first question about the private sector and what can be done and how and what's happening. But I guess the major question is are companies doing enough? And if not, what more should they do? And again, I apologize. It's just a short answer to that. It's a tough question. But are they doing enough, or what more could we be asking them to do?
It's a fair question, by the way. So you could say, are they doing enough to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals of zero hunger and good health and well-being in 2030? Well, the short answer is not enough, Mark. Not enough to serve the real needs of the people. So far, only 30% of all the products produced in the world are regarded as healthy. So this implies we have a long way to go. So the business can do more and should do more. Now, I have to tell you, as I said before, the Access to Nutrition Global Index 2021 gives insights into how companies perform what and where they need to do better and how they can do that. The index is published online, and it gives you the full best practices that all companies can, I think, and should learn from.
Okay, thanks, Paulus. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I would like to see by 2030 that 50% of all the food produced are regarded as healthy in the world. That would be a major leap forward. So there's a major task with the companies, but it starts with a firm belief of their management that change is possible. Thank you.
Okay, no, thank you so much, Paulus. Let me wrap it up there and hand back to Janet. Janet, thank you so much.
And that's a great challenge to end on. So thank you to Mark and to the entire panel for sharing those insights with us. This brings us to our third panel, which will explore the nutrition challenges of the most vulnerable and consider what is needed to ensure resilient and inclusive food systems. I'm pleased to introduce Nomiko Lokovic, Senior Research Coordinator with CGIAR's Research Program on Agriculture for Nutrition and Health and President of African Nutrition Society, to moderate this discussion. Nomiko, we look forward to hearing from you and your panel about this critical subject.
Thank you very much, Janet. I wanted to IT if we could have the three panelists on the screen together, please. The thing about resilience and inclusivity is the fact that across the different settings, whether rural or urban, there are groups of the population that are especially vulnerable. And these may include children under 2 years old, mothers. It might also include people who live in urban slums or indeed in rural settings that are prone to drought and the like. So this panel will look at sharing experiences of their work in settings that are exhibit some of these vulnerabilities, to reflect on how they are contextualizing to try and address inclusivity into the broader food system. And so I want to start with Liz Kimani. I have three panelists. I have Liz Kimani from the African Population and Health Research Center, where she is a senior scientist. I have Given Chipili from Mukuba University in Zambia. And I have Kumla Chu Geremu, who is a research officer at the International Livestock Research Institute. Liz, can I start with you and really get an impression of the setting where you are working? What is the vulnerability that you are dealing with that is limiting inclusivity of food systems? Liz?
Yeah, thank you so much, Namukolo. So I work amongst the urban poor in Kenya, and I particularly work in Nairobi. I've been working in Nairobi for the last almost 20 years, and the vulnerability in this context is very high levels of poverty, and thus high levels of food insecurity. Like about 80% of households are food insecure, and close to 50% of children under 5 years are stunted. So that's the kind. So because they live in urban areas, they depend a lot on purchased food. Yet they don't. Many of them are jobless and they don't have money. They are high. There's high level of poverty. So really, getting access to food is the main vulnerability because they have to purchase and they don't have money.
Thank you very much. And if I can move on to Given. Given. Kind of the same kind of question. In your setting where you are addressing vulnerability, what is the peculiar vulnerability that you're dealing with in your setting? Over to you, Given.
So we are working, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So we are working in the northern part of Zambia, where the levels of stunting are so high. And we are working with infants, that's children below 1 year. And we are trying to address this situation because amongst the all provinces, this is like the one that has highly stunted children. So we are trying to address that.
Okay, and so what is it that makes them so vulnerable in the particular area?
I think the type of food that is given to them, because they are weaned with porridge made from cassava and maize that is usually prepared without anything added, just salt. And as a result, they are not getting any other nutrients apart from the breast, if they are breastfeeding, and the same porridge. So they are so exposed, despite having abundance of fish in the area.
If there is fish in the area, it means these little ones are actually excluded from benefiting from that fish. Okay, so let me move on then to Kumlachu. Kumlachu, you also have a completely different setting, a rural setting too, but what exactly is the vulnerability you're trying to address in your setting? Over to you, Kumlachu.
Thank you, Namukulo. Just in my setting, it's a bit different. As you mentioned, we are working in the rural areas of Ethiopia, but our beneficiaries are 80% of them are women-headed. They have limited access to market. They have limited access to nutritious food, and they have even limited access to nutritious knowledge. And some of them have limited access to income. Just based on these factors, they are vulnerable in all these settings.
So different, it sounds like different vulnerabilities, different settings that requires some, creative thinking. So back to you again, Liz. How have you dealt with this situation? What kind of intervention have you come up with to address the poverty, the lack of money, and yet you want them to eat well? How have you addressed that? Liz?
Okay, yeah, thank you. So through some public engagement amongst the urban poor for the last 4 years, really engaging them about the situation of food security and also just to understand the concepts. And there have been suggestions about that they would want to be supported to do urban farming because they consider that as a way of really dealing with the issue of food insecurity. And so we developed a vision, and this vision, and which went through a vision prize by the Rockefeller Foundation, and it was successful. Some of the strategies that we are promoting. One is the innovative agroecological urban farming in urban areas to take care of the people, to feed the people, but also to take care of the environment, because the environment is also very critical. And so working with the women and youth groups in this context to be able to support their community, to be able to start urban farming. And actually, because of the issue of space, we are talking about innovative. And innovative here, we are talking about vertical gardening to be able to create space upwards. So that's one of the interventions.
So in those very crowded Nairobi slums, you have found enough space for vertical farming to be able to have some meaningful urban farming?
So I can say we are at the start of this initiative. We are working with youth and women groups that are already doing something. So we really just want to support them to be able to expand their work and to be able to make their work more effective. And yes, we have found some spaces. There are some spaces in the community that we are able to put up those gardens. And one of the things we'll be doing is also talking with the plot owners to allow the community, the people in the plot, to be able to set up those gardens. It could be a pallet garden, it could be a sack, it could be just a vertical structure or wall gardening. But then also one of the strategies is really to make schools fruity, and schools have space usually, and especially public public schools in these spaces or other schools, they have space, and we want to really make the schools fruity and also have kitchen gardens in those schools to support this. So we are tackling this from different perspectives.
So it's really nice to hear that the schools, even in the slums, have a bit more space, and you can actually take advantage of that as well. And given, so we have excluded the babies from the fish. So what exactly is the problem, and how are you addressing it?
Okay, so basically, even though there is abundance of fish, the fish that is easily accessible and available to the households is small fish, because the bigger fish that is harvested from the rivers and lakes is sold so that the fishermen have income to support their family. By the way, this is a fishing community where we are conducting our study. So what we are trying to do is to help the community utilize the small fish so that it is given to the children. The children are not given this small fish because they fear that it can shock them. So in our study, we processed the small fish into a powder that can be added to any food that is given to children aged 6 months to 1 year as they are weaning them, so that it's easy for fish to be given to these children.
And have you already seen some kind of impacts of that in the work that you have done?
Yes, we've seen some impact, because we had actually used 2 groups, whereby we used the intervention group and the control group. In the control group, we gave them sorghum powder, and to the sorghum powder, we just added a little bit of fish, 3 grams per 100 grams, so that it smells like fish. And we blinded everyone from the health workers to the community workers and the mothers. And we have seen, after following them up for a period of 6 months, the children that were enrolled in the intervention group had improved growth compared to those that were in the control that received sorghum.
In other words, it sounds like you can actually, by adopting this method of complementary feeding, then the children will not be left out from access to the fish that is actually available in these households. That's actually very interesting. I'm going to come back to you later on, because I'm really interested. I know that Zambia has this 1,000 Most Critical Days program that is promoting complementary feeding. And I'm going to come back to you later on, because I want to see how you are perhaps trying to link to that, because what you've done out there in the fishing communities in the north might actually be relevant elsewhere in the country. Kumlachu, you are dealing with poor rural communities. Knowledge is an issue, and by virtue of that, they're being excluded from the benefits they could otherwise accrue, even from the existing food systems. Could you give us an idea of how you are going about this program of yours to become more inclusive? Over to you.
Okay, thank you. Just we had 2 projects on the ground in Ethiopia. The first one was the African chicken genetic gains. We have started by distributing free chickens for these beneficiaries, and we realized that this doesn't bring an outcome. We lately realized that they had no sufficient, nutrition knowledge. They don't have just nutritious diet on the plate. So we started by introducing a new project, that the ILRI-led project that was agriculture to nutrition. We started linking agriculture and nutrition. We just made an integrated, applied an integrated approach, that is poultry plus vegetable seeds. We introduced vegetable seeds. We distributed them, just improved vegetable seed to them, and just again, plus social and behavioral change communication package. We started teaching them just weekly nutrition education, and even cookery sessions, practical sessions. Here by this, we started just integrating this approach, and we started just looking at impacts and improvements on this.
Okay,
back to you now.
Yeah, thank you very much. And Liz, if I can come to you next with these vertical gardening prospects. Within the school premises, if you go in there, are you able to link these to school feeding, and how is that working out as part of your broader inclusivity perspective?
Yes, thank you so much. Actually, that's our plan. As I said, we are just at the starting. We just started these activities this year, so we've not really gone far, but that is in our strategy to make this a part of the school feeding program. Like we talk about, many people talk about the school feeding programs, even where they exist. The children are not fed with nutritious diets, and fruits or vegetables are lacking. So if we can be able to at least do that and to provide the vegetables and fruits within the diet, then we are improving the diets of the children. So that's a major focus, and especially preschools and daycare centers within this context. If we can be able to do this, that's a major gain from this initiative.
So that I really, personally, I do look forward to see how it pans out in the end. I've been to some of the slums where you are working, and I think it can really make a good difference in terms of bringing people that are being left behind from some of these other developments. Given I left you with a question earlier on the 1,000 most critical days program in Zambia. How do you see linking the evidence that you have generated to this national program, that I know they are also including fisheries as intervention areas in it? Over to you, Given. Have we lost Given, perhaps? Looks like Given's line has dropped. Let me move on to perhaps back to Kumulachu then. Kumulachu, is there anything that stands out to you as part of the intervention that you were doing in this community? You said knowledge, in your view, was one of the ways in which the community would have been excluded from benefiting from the food system, or even engaging to improve their local food system. Is there any lessons that you have learned from the communities themselves that you can incorporate in your interventions? Over to you. Kumulachu, you are muted.
Okay, sorry. Just that's a really interesting question. When we started the project, we were just distributing free chicken, and just we integrated with nutrition education. But lately, the beneficiaries themselves just came back to us and requested us just they don't have improved vegetable seeds. So that was a demand driven, and we have learned that this should be included in their diet, and we have just negotiated with in Ethiopia there is agriculture ATA, the Agricultural Transformation Agency, and working with the Ministry of Agriculture, we have just procured 12 types of improved vegetable seeds, and we have included this as a package. So the lessons learned was we didn't just realize that they don't have this improved vegetable seeds, and we didn't realize that. We thought that they have in their backyards, but it was demand driven, and we understood that this might be one of the package. Besides this, even if they had some vegetables on their backyards, this was seasonal. And after just this project was introduced, we have just worked with the Ministry of Agriculture, and in all seasons, they were able to get vegetables on their plate, so their nutrition status was improved. Back to Namukulo.
That's very nice. I like the fact that the Agriculture Transformation Agency has come on board, because normally, that's not the level of community engagement that the Agriculture Transformation Agency engages with. So that in itself is also some level of inclusivity, I think. In the interest of time, given I see that you're back, what I would like to ask you is maybe address the question in the chat. And the question was, how are you linking these good evidence that you have generated in your project to the 1,000 Most Critical Days program in Zambia, which I know is targeting complementary feeding, but also targeting small-scale fisheries, targeting women for that matter. So it'll be nice to hear about that. But to really wrap up, you can see that vulnerabilities come in different ways for different communities. And so if we are to address inclusivity of food systems, it is really important to look at what is it in the particular community setting that excludes people, and what are they being excluded from? Because this also varies depending on the community. The local context must then provide the direction for what inclusivity actually means within that setting, and then the interventions must be developed to address that. And on that, I would like to say thank you very much to the panelists, Liz, Kumlachu, Given, and back to you, Janet.
Thank you, Namakolo, and also thank you to your entire panel for your thoughts. That was a really informative session and gave us a lot to think about. All three of these discussions have raised a lot of issues and ideas around ensuring everyone everywhere has access to nutritious diets. And in a few minutes, we'll ask a group of stakeholders to reflect on what they've heard from a variety of perspectives. But first, we'd like to ask for your reflections as our audience members. So please, once again, go to menti.com and enter the code you see on the screen. It'll be up in just a moment. Here it comes. We're going to revisit that question we posed at the beginning of this session. What do you see as critical priority actions for ensuring nutritious diets for everyone everywhere? At the beginning of this session, the two most emphasized of these actions were building partnerships and cross-sectoral collaborations and understanding and assessing trade-offs. So it'll be interesting to see as the conversation has gone on, have our views shifted in any way in terms of where we might put a little bit more emphasis on starting, what is most crucial amongst all of these very crucial actions. So it's a difficult priority ranking to give, but we've got some results coming in. Understanding and assessing trade-offs is coming in with some more emphasis in this round. That's interesting to see. But also building partnerships and cross-sectoral collaborations, still holding very strong in terms of emphasis. And definitely there are many actions beyond these here, but we're just kind of considering a sampling of things and thinking about where it might be important to put some emphasis. So that's fantastic. We're still seeing some responses coming in, and it is interesting to see how today's conversation is shaping thoughts about priority actions for nutrition. And I'm pleased now to introduce our fourth and final panel to further reflect on this and on what we've heard today. To moderate this conversation, I'd like to welcome Sunitha Kadiyala, Professor of Global Nutrition at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine and Director of the Agriculture, Nutrition and Health Academy. Sunitha, we're very much looking forward to hearing from you and the panel reflecting on everything that we've heard today.
Thank you, Janet, and thank you, the One CGIAR, for this event and all the audience and the speakers that have gone before our panelists now. It was a really fascinating discussion to hear you all and also see how some of the rankings have changed as the conversation has progressed. I also see quite a lot of buzzing in the chat, which shows that there's a lot of interest in engaging with this topic. Now, in this last session, I and my fellow panelists are charged with a non-trivial task, which is to really take everything they have heard today and also from their own experiences and vantage points to reflect on some of the key takeaways that have come out. I'll start by introducing all the 4 panelists, so please do pay attention. And then I will start by asking each of them a few questions. And as others have had, we just have about 25 minutes. So fellow panelists, I would ask you to keep your answers short and punchy, but I'm sure that you will be up for the challenge since you're all extremely experienced. So the first panelist I would like to introduce you is to Sunichi Nakada-san, who is a senior advisor on nutrition and food security at the Japan International Cooperation Agency, JICA, where he's responsible for provision of strategic policy guidance on malnutrition and sustainable agriculture development nexus, an extremely timely topic following the UN Food System Summit and at this summit and the discussions we are having today. Thank you, Sunichi-san, for actually Japan for hosting this event. Sunichi-san also holds a master's in agronomy and rangeland science from the University of California, Davis. Our second panelist, in no particular order actually, is Dr. Morseda Chowdhury, who is the Director of Health, Nutrition and Population Program at BRAC in Bangladesh. She has extensive experience in program design to implementation at scale, especially to reduce maternal, neonatal and child mortality among the underprivileged population in Bangladesh. In 2019, she received a PhD from the School of Public Health, University of Sydney, Australia. Our third panelist is Dr. Martin Fregenet, who is the Director of Agriculture and Agro-Industry at the African Development Bank. And here, what I found very fascinating to find out that he was the first he developed the first molecular genetic map of cassava and started the first molecular breeding program of cassava. Welcome, Dr. Fregenet, Martin. Here, he was also the chief technical advisor to the Minister of Agriculture in Nigeria from 2012 to 2015. And he received a PhD in plant genetics and breeding from the University of Ibadan. Our final panelist, Ariana Giuliodori, was appointed as the Secretary General of the World Farmers Organization in December 2017. She is passionate about promoting solid governance of the association and the international partnerships to ensure that farmers can play a key role in addressing global sustainability challenges, a very relevant topic for our discussion today. She has an MBA from Sorbonne University and another master's in economics and rural development at Siena University in Italy. Welcome, dear panelists. I would like each of you to respond to the following question, which has been the central topic of conversation in the previous 2 panels. Which is that we know that the competition between the availability and affordability of safe and healthy diets in the food environments that we live in today and the widely marketed ultra-processed foods is rather stiff. People have to make these choices for various reasons that our previous panelists have mentioned before. From your own experience and what you have heard today, how can public-private incentives be better aligned to deliver healthy, sustainable diets and drastically decelerate the consumption of ultra-processed and other unhealthy foods, especially in resource-poor contexts? May I ask Sunichi-san to deliberate on this issue first?
Okay, thank you very much. Yes. You mentioned about how private sector can be involved into this healthy diet promotion and consumption. In general, private sector will respond to the market demand. So the question is how we can create demand for the healthy diet, and it is a one. If I say in one phrase, it can be developed through co-development approach, which was mentioned in the presentation. By collaboration of government, consumer, and private sector. If I look back to Japanese experience, after 50 years ago, when Japanese diet was very unhealthy in terms of dietary balance, heavily relying on carbohydrate, government initially set up dietary guidance or dietary difference intake. Based on that, every year, government conducted a nutrition survey. And based on that, there was advocacy from the top level and down to ground level. That create the demand for protein, a diversified diet and the protein demand. And it stimulates the private sector how to promote production of affordable protein. That was mainly fish industry. Fish industry tried to develop technology to expand shelf life by processing, which enable affordable and sustainable, affordable and safe delivery of processed fish to the inland area. And so that is a kind of creation of demand by the government guideline, and the private sector responded it to the technical innovation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It directly corresponds to some of the chat that is going on in the chat box. Thank you very much. That's a very compelling story of Japan and creating demand for protein-rich food. Next on my screen, I hope you don't mind if I call you by your first names. Morseda, would you like to go next?
Sure, thank you. I would like to concentrate on three major areas. One is the players. One is government, who is responsible for making legislations and execution, and the legislation should go for promoting healthy diets and incentivizing for producing unhealthy diets. So, but this is the ideal case, and this is not always happening. So the execution is in some countries is very strong, like in Japan, but in countries like ours is not that strong. So now if I come to the two other players like supply side and demand side, let's come to supply side first. So why supply side will produce good nutritious food? Why they will do the trade-off? If producing ultra-processed food is more profitable than producing less shelf life nutritious food, then there has to be some sort of incentive, and that has to be ensured by government. And so we have to invest through research in high-yielding food production, and then storage, and crop insurance, and climate-resilient varieties. So and finally, market linkage. And this could be a good selling point for smallholder farmers, and especially women farmers who are really inclined to do this sort of business. And if proper knowledge is given along with this support. And finally, the demand side, who will consume, demand some influences the market. So if a consumer knows that what is good for them and it is accessible in the market, then ultimately market will be reshaped. So the ultimate behavior change communication should go that way, that this is good, the balanced diet is what necessary for a person, and why it is necessary, that should be very well described. I'll stop here.
Great, thanks. The issue of women farmers, and this is music to, of course, all of us who are involved in research, to both Sunichi-san and you have put together a very strong research agenda for us to rise up to. Thanks for that. And Martin, may I ask you to go next?
Yeah, thank you very much, and Sunita. It's a pleasure to be with you all on this panel. I want to thank the CGIAR and the government of Japan for inviting us. First of all, I'd like to say that we are what we eat. And this is even more true for children. Between the ages of 0 and 1,000, a child who's malnourished will never, ever develop his full mental, physical, and intellectual capacity. So for us at the African Development Bank, this is a very important topic. Stunted children lead to stunted adults, lead to stunted economies. And then, but coming to your, what you said about how can we, the public-private, work together, to ensure that people don't fill their stomachs with highly refined food, because it's the cheapest. That's why they eat those foods. It's really cheap. A bowl of noodles, in any African countries, is probably like something like 20 cents. Compared to a bowl of real decent food, which somebody estimated to be like $1.50. And when wages are less than $1 a day, the 20 cents is probably what you can. So what I'd just like to say is three things, very quickly. First of all, we have to work together, the public and private, to increase the productivity of these major staples that feed our continent. Second, we have to diversify the bread, our bread basket. Add things like low carbon emission and aquaculture. I had a lot of very interesting things about aquaculture here today. And also things like small livestock, both poultry and goats and sheep, because those are the things that actually provides children the very important protein, and fats that they need for their development. And the last thing I'd like to say is food safety. Many African children are malnourished because there's so much diarrhea. The kind of food they eat, they end up, just passing out all the nutrients they have managed to absorb. So for us at the bank, we're working on what we call the technologies for African agricultural transformation. And this is in collaboration with 11 CG centers. And here we actually are emphasizing high macronutrient, commodities. One is the high iron bean, and the other one is the orange flesh, sweet potatoes. The third is wheat, but here we're looking at zinc, high iron zinc, and also heat tolerant wheat, and because of climate change. And then lastly, maize, of course, drought tolerant, but also maize that has more beta carotene. And here we're working very closely with seed company. I really like what the gentleman from India said. It was a really, very powerful statement. He said, you really need to get quality seeds of these high nutrient foods to farmers at scale. I really like that. And that's what we're trying to do at the bank, working with the CGIAR. More than 11 million farmers have received, these improved seeds. And we hope that it will double productivity to bring down the cost of food. It's only with higher productivity can actually have lower food. And then finally, diversify the bread basket. This gift tilapia that's genetically improved farm tilapia is actually a game changer. In Egypt, now in Nigeria, and now in DRC, it's probably the cheapest form of protein, even cheaper than chicken. So we're really pushing that on that TAT. And then also, of course, we are adding a new commodity compact to TAT, which has to do with vegetables and fruits. Let me stop here because I've probably taken too long already. Thank you.
Thank you. Some of your points are music to our one CGIAR colleagues here who have been working on biofortified crops. Ariana, would you like to go next?
Sure, thanks. First of all, let me thank you for this opportunity. I really enjoyed the conversation so far. I've been learning a lot. So I will not repeat what so many speakers have already referred to, but I would like to add one complexity to this puzzle. And the point is that to really make a step forward, we must solve the unbearable paradox of the people that are producing food. There are also the people who are hungry. And this is the first step to make to create a new pathway and to create a system in which we have access to healthy, nutritious food, enough healthy and nutritious food, enough healthy and nutritious food. Let me repeat that. And to do that, we must bet on those people, bet on the farmers. That's our most important solution. That's what we really need to do to make the game really shift to a new level and to accelerate in the right direction. And jump it from one point to another. So first, solve this paradox. Second, I think we all must resist the temptation of creating boxes and identifying easy trade-offs or categories. The world is not black or white here, and we must avoid, for instance, positioning rural versus rural in this game, or local versus global, or small versus big. No, we are living one challenge, and probably the farmers, again, are those people, because we are people in this game, that can help us solve the issue, because we can really create the bridge between those who produce food, those who consume food. We can make it smaller as a distance, and when a product goes out of our farm is the freshest possible, the freshest ever. So I'll stop here for now, just to provoke a little bit our other thoughts, but happy to come back to the points more in details.
Yeah, I love that. We, just think of the farmers and putting them at the center, and not creating more divisions. I think that brings us nicely to actually the next topic. In the previous panel, the panelists have talked about inclusion and marginalization, therefore, also. So when we talk about prioritizing actions at the national level, often this idea of inclusion doesn't, well, I want to know how that plays out in terms of really talking of inclusion at the national and subnational levels, and even maybe even more granular levels in terms of making inclusion and reaching everyone and reducing social and economic marginalization a distant reality. Here, I would ask for this question. I know all of you are well placed to ask this question, answer this question, but I would ask Sunichi-san and Martin in that order, or maybe Martin first and then Sunichi-san, just to mix up a bit. And you have just about 2 minutes or less each, if you don't mind answering that, about inclusion and how to improve that, and so that we are not getting lost in national averages.
Sunita, that's a really, really very, very good question, because you see, average is high extremes, and if you look at the extremes are really, really kind of very sad. I enjoyed the session on nutrition in the slums, and it could tell you that in fact there's so much that can be done without even too much money, and that's so inclusion is so important for us. And I think from 3 points, one is what a bank is doing in Ethiopia, and that's where we go to existing irrigation schemes, existing bank projects, and we just provide them seeds of vegetables, seeds of legumes, things that you can easily produce alongside your main crop, and just so I think what we need to do actually is those kind of low cost, easy, interventions. And I really like what the other speakers spoke about. We need to provide them a little package. It could be 5 chicks and a bag of feed, or it could be seeds of vegetables, whatever it is. Provide them to the mothers, because they're the ones who really care about their children. Those kind of simple things can be done by governments and can be done by development agencies, but we need to do it at scale, tens of millions. Thank you.
Thank you. Sunichi-san, so in terms of inclusion, what are some of the opportunities and challenges to improve inclusion?
Okay, thank you. So today we had 3 presentations, which all of them include a small-scale, sustainable production system for household-level food security. Those technologies need to be promoted, in a scale. And the issue is how to convince government to invest in that part. And that I think there is a lot of academy. In case of Malawi example, there is an assessment or cost assessment comparing agricultural subsidy and self-production system. I mean, case in RCT assessment in Malawi. So those kind of impact assessment in terms of government finance, in terms of government finance, that is a needed area to scale up this technology.
Thank you. Thank you. Ariana, let me come to you. You talked about farmers, and the question we have here in the context of sustainable agriculture is how can farmers de-risk the transition to more sustainable agricultural practices and encourage production of more nutrient-dense and safe foods that we have been talking about? You're on mute. If you could unmute.
You're right. I was on mute. Oh, I should have known now after all these months.
Happens to all of us. Yeah.
No, thanks for this question. I want to quote the amazing experience that Emma from Uganda at the very beginning of this beautiful webinar referred to. She said, it all started with me willing to put food on the table of my family. And I think that she brought one element that has not yet appeared in our conversation, that is family farmers are the very soul of food production in the world. And if family farmers are then big or small is not the issue. The point is, are they viable? Are they able to provide food to their families and then to their communities, and then to keep traditions alive in rural areas, and then to feed the families that are then living in towns? That's the point. And that's why it's so important for us, the farmers of the world, to focus on sustainability under its three perspectives and not only on the environmental one, for instance. Only if a farmer is viable and is able to decently earn his or her living out of the activity, he or she will be able to invest, for instance, in economic and environmental sustainability, and will be able to deliver those ecosystem services that go beyond the dimension of environment and really take the fabric of our communities alive. So first point, sustainability under the three perspective for the family farmers of the world that are the soul of agriculture. That's the second point. But then third point that I would like to add, it's not about the farmers to risk in the activity. We are in this together.
Right.
It's a system thing. It's a systemic approach, and we must be ready to face the big thing that is preventing the farmers to feed properly the world, and it is a lack of balance of power in food value chains. If we are ready to invest on this, to co-create, to co-design, as many speakers like Inga Brewer has been referring to, then the farmers are ready to play the game. But it's not just simply the risk in the farmers transition, it's the system transition. Thank you.
That's a fantastic point. I think that's a Twitter-worthy point. I think not that I'm on Twitter, but somebody can do that. Like, it's not just for farmers to do it. It is the whole system must enable this to happen. And Morceda, you have really the last word on this discussion. So we have heard quite a lot about how people should come together, sectors should come together, and maybe not as eloquently today, but explicitly today, but how disciplines need to come together that has been implicit in the discussions. How do you see this getting operationalized in real life? BRAC and runs humongous programs, and Bangladesh has actually been probably one of the successful countries in mounting these scaled up multi-sectoral programs. What are the key ingredients of success you can leave us with today?
Yeah, thank you. I think I'll start with referring Ariana's co-creation that BRAC has created some case studies on that. Like in 70s, when BRAC first started working with women, because BRAC realized that women are the best person to invest because they are the best manager. Sorry to say, here are many men here, so never mind. And then BRAC gave them chicken and poultry for business, and then found that poultry, the chickens are dying. So then how they will do the business? Then they start, BRAC created a group of female paramedic who will like give vaccines to the chicken, and then it didn't work. So then they started with talking to women that why the chicken is dying, because the food is not good. Then BRAC imported good maize. So the maize was again given to farmers, and then this maize was for the chicken food. And over the period, BRAC then gave credit to 400,000 women, and then the chicken production increased from 6 to 26. And there was a huge impact on income and also on diet, and stunting reduced by 74% from 1975 to 1991. So that means if you invest and create the whole value chain, you have to invest the whole value chain. Otherwise, it won't work. If you just invest in the chicken, give the chicken, and then you come out, then it won't work. The second example is the seed, because our another panelist was talking about seed, because we are investing in like creating multiple seeds, because you know Bangladesh is like climate prone country, and we have been producing the seeds with the help of 7,000 farmers, and we are like distributing the and we have created a system of dealers and retailers, and through this it's going to all over the country. These seeds are high yielding varieties and very climate resilient. So this is how it's working. And also vegetable is, you know, in Bangladeshi diet, if you see, it's highly imbalanced towards rice. So we are trying to make vegetable more popular through this vegetable distribution, seed distribution. So these are two examples, but I have many, so we will share later.
I mean, it always blows my mind on how you know, some organizations and countries have really scaled this up, and there's a lot. I think in our bar graphs, learning from each other was one of the most important things that has come up from the Menti poll. And actually, you have given a fantastic example of all of you actually on systems approaches. Really, how do you take a systems approach to solve the problems we are facing today? Thank you very much on that note. And audience, you will agree that this has been a fantastic panel. Thank you for also helping us stay on time.
Thank you, Sunita, and to the entire panel for those thoughtful insights that really pulled everything together. And I'm sure I speak for our entire audience when I say your comments really enriched what we heard from our discussions throughout the session. We have definitely heard a lot today, and summarizing all of this in just a few minutes is no easy task, but we're fortunate to have just the person to do it. I'd like to ask Juan Lucas Restrepo, CGIAR's Global Director for Partnerships and Advocacy, to join us once again to reflect on all that he's heard today.
Thank you, Janet, and I can tell you that I will probably be disappointing all of you, given the richness of this discussion. Listening to the contributions and insights from expert partners and stakeholders has been amazing. What I can ensure you is that our colleagues will ensure that we capture the great value from what we heard during this past couple of hours. So very quickly, takeaways from the different panels and the fourth session as well. We heard about accelerating getting nutrient-enriched crops such as biofortified staples, and guaranteeing their that farmers have not only access to seeds, but to markets, and how those can be done through school feeding or subsidized price programs for the poor. For example, we heard about embracing the complexity through strengthened multi-sectoral approaches, how integrated agriculture nutrition marketing programs should be designed and tested as a solution space. We also saw a number of ideas, innovative ideas emerging about locally led solutions, this bottom-up food systems transformation and nutrition sensitive transformation to improve a more sustainable agricultural practice. From panel 2, we heard about food environments and how they are increasingly instrumental in influencing the food choices that poor consumers make. So we need to understand how these spaces function and what would be appropriate governance models and how to ensure the provision of safe and healthy diets to be incentivized across this context. And we heard about a number of issues that could be investigated and should be worked on, such as this competition. And we heard a lot about this today, from unhealthy, ultra-processed, sometimes ultra-cheap, but easily consumed foods, and what needs to be done from the public and private sector to govern better these spaces. We heard a lot about trade-offs and that we need to understand them and embrace them. And it's not only between affordability, convenience, and nutrition, but it's also those trade-offs, for example, in terms of income and opportunities for women and youth that sometimes come through informal wet markets, informal marketing spaces, and how organizing these spaces may become exclusionary in terms of what these vulnerable communities can get. And then, of course, there is the element of aligning and squaring the circle about incentives. So incentives and subsidies through food companies, regulations, and really using guidelines and other instruments to balance a better, a more nutrition sensitive food system. On the panel 3, we heard about vulnerabilities and exclusion manifested in many different ways under different local settings, and acknowledging the difference in local settings is absolutely critical. And as food systems transform, it's absolutely critical to understand where vulnerable communities may be excluded as this transformation takes place, so we ensure inclusivity is adequately addressed in a nuanced manner. And we heard about very exciting and robust innovations, such as adding value to locally available aquatic foods, such as small fish, vertical farming, agroecological approaches, and others that can support nutrition objectives. On the final panel, on some takeaways from stakeholders, we heard in terms of public-private incentives that about this very virtuous cycle, and with the example of Italy that Sunishi provided, of the guidelines, surveys, and advocacy cycles as a virtuous cycle for food system transformation. We heard from Morseda about the strong government role that needs to cover legislation, incentives, research as a very important element, with gender sensitivity and making sure the investments create a more enabling environment. The focus, and I've heard this from him often, on the investments, public-private investments, focusing not only on the poorest, but on children, and focusing on stunting, and how productivity diversification, room for more animal protein in those undernourished populations will be critical. And Ariana mentioned the paradox of hungry farmers and farmers, as well as a focus and game changers around this topic. In Finalizing the session, we heard about opportunities on low-cost complementary interventions to diversify production and diets at scale. We heard about scaling self-production technologies at the household level and convincing governments to move in that direction. And we heard again from Ariana how family farmers' viability is absolutely critical, as when and if they are viable, they can themselves transform and become investors in this whole transformation efforts. And a very important reminder for Morceda on women at the center of better food environments, given the extensive data we got around this. So in closing, you will hear a video on December 7th from Kundavi, our Managing Director for Global Engagement and Innovation, and she will be telling you how CGIAR is very committed not only to listening to all of you, but with the clarity that we need to increase nutrition security at the systems, farm, and genetic level, given our positioning in this global domain. So this is where we are. We need to shift the global narrative from feeding the global population to nourishing it and ending malnutrition for everyone, everywhere. So this was kind of what I got today, Janet. Great conversation. Back to you.
Thank you, Juan Lucas. And indeed, it was a great conversation with so much to reflect on. And while these discussions and actions must and will carry on toward meeting our global nutrition goals, our conversation today is now at an end. But I'd like to thank all our speakers for their rich insights and ideas, and also everyone who joined us from all over the world for bringing your comments and your questions and helping to create such a rich and inspiring discussion. We look forward to further conversations, as Juan Lucas mentioned, at the Nutrition for Growth Summit next week, and to working with all of you moving forward. Thanks again for being part of our conversation today.